Thank you so much, John. Thank you to Women's March again and for organizing this very important event. I'm still in a state of sadness, state of anger, shame. I don't want to call that in because I think many of us are feeling that right here in this room. I think the first question we want to start off with is really a check-in with both of you, who are members of the Native and Indigenous tribe. There's so much going on currently, politically, and many of us are in this state of mind that a lot of what's going on as far as family separation goes, we're identifying it at the border. We heard of the news of a 7-year-old who has passed away in Border Patrol custody. We've heard of the thousands of children who are ripped away from their mothers. And then we think that, in 2018, family separation is what's happening at the border. But Dawnland is evidence of the trauma that the Native and Indigenous community has faced for years. This movie focuses on, years in the late 70s, but let's not forget that the trauma has been going on for hundreds of years since the beginning of, the origination of the United States of America. Yes. And so before we dive into the movie itself, let's dive into you and do a check-in with both of you. And how all of this, you have to revisit history. You have to revisit your own pain and trauma, and at the same time find the courage to provide hope for many of us who are sharing the shame and the guilt today. So Dr. Miko, we'll start with you.
Well, I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. It's a difficult film to sit through. I had to watch it twice before I came, but we Indians don't travel alone. So I want to thank my family for being here, and also the members of my community, Idle No More, SF Bay. What it brings up to me, this really goes back, and I'm probably going to pain Maury by this. I'm her former professor. It goes back to the 1600s, where children were separated and taken to praying towns. So we sort of know more about Carlisle. It's the one that created that slogan, kill the Indian, save the man. So we know more about that, and there are more pictures of that. So we have documentation of that. But it was going on for a long time before that. And I think I'm glad you mentioned trauma. There's some handouts somewhere on historical trauma that are available to you, and also the Geneva Convention of 1948, which was created in the wake of the Jewish Holocaust. But really everything on that convention was done and is being done to Native children.
Dr. Villaluna? Madi?
Hi. So first, before I start talking, I just want to, and then we probably did it earlier, but I just want to acknowledge the land that we're on. And we're on stolen, occupied, Ramatash Ohlone, unceded territory. So I just want to give voice to that first. And then second, I know they said a little bit about my bio, and actually some of those are former projects I have been in, but I wanted to give voice of how my piece of why I'm sitting here on the stage. Actually, a close friend of mine was in the film. Their name was Dawn. Do you remember the interview with Dawn Neptune Adams? It was a really close friend of mine. And I actually visited Dawn in Maine. Dawn took me to Indian Island. I went to Louis Sockalexis's grave. If you don't know who Louis Sockalexis was, he was the first person of color and the first Indigenous person in Major League Baseball, period. Played for the Cleveland Spiders, which is now known as the Cleveland. So, I went to Katahdin, close to it, which is where the first light of sunshine hits anywhere in the United States. So if you notice, a lot of people are making parallels, I think they said in the film, like, why not here first? Because everything happens here first. This is the beginning. And a lot of that is referring to that. And different things as well. And so actually Dawn gave me permission. It said, yes, please, like, because I forgot, was it Christine? Someone asked me, and I said, oh, wait a second, let me hit up my friend Dawn, because I know this film. I remember when she was telling me about doing the film. So, and then she was like, yes, please, can you please be on stage, and I give you permission, and please. So, I met a lot with her own Penobscot elders. I spent time there. We picked cocktails together. We did a lot of stuff. I spent a lot of time there with that land. And, I just want to say I'm really moved even deeper every time I watch the film. Because, it's just not in Maine. It's everywhere. Just like 2 or 3 years ago, I knew of a Native family. And the kids were taken from their Native parent here in San Francisco. And those kids, both of their parents are enrolled in both of their tribes. The kids are technically not enrolled. The parents just never got around to it. But they're clearly descendants, right? And that's what ICWA applies to. They talked about ICWA in the film. And San Francisco, the CPS system here would honor ICWA and actually place them outside of the Native community, the Bay Area Native community. And they stay with folks who are non-Natives, people they weren't even related to. And so I think that's really sad that it's not just in Maine, this is happening here too in the Bay Area. So just, thinking about that and just tying it, I was asked to speak along with another person at the Families Belong Together March here in San Francisco. And one thing we talked about, I'm from here in part Mohawk and Southern Tagalog, which is from the Philippines. And then my friend, I can't remember her tribe, but she's from a tribe in Bolivia, and she said it really well. But we talked about how as indigenous peoples to the Americas, like, we have been moving back and forth. Folks have been migrating and stealing and pulling families apart has always been part of the poison that this colonial government has done in different ways, whether it's through CPS, foster care, residential schools, boarding schools, sometimes public schools still now. And we talked about that, and then we also tied it along with sometimes it happens where someone gets picked up for a crime that they didn't even commit because they fit a profile, too. And that's another way to pull apart the family. Because I think, this colonial government, they know that's where the power is, right? The power rests within keeping the family community intact. And the more you can destroy that, then the more, success you have assimilating and continuing the genocide on oppressed peoples. And so I just really want to think about that. And I really would personally love if at some point we could ask you all questions, because I bet there might have been times for people, especially if you're a settler, especially a white settler, how did you feel about watching this film? I know how I feel, but I have a different perspective, a different position. So that's something I also want folks to think about, especially when they talked about the room with they had 2 separate rooms, and they had asked folks to go on the bottom, and then other folks stay on top. I felt slightly uncomfortable with that whole time. I'm like, oh, I've been in that situation before. So those are just some of my first thoughts. Yeah. And so thank you for having me here.
Can I mention something? The man on the commissioner of the 2 Native people is Mashpee Wampanoag, and they just had their tribal status revoked.
Yeah.
So their trust relationship for 320 acres of their land by the administration was removed, because the idea was that with the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, because the Mashpee weren't recognized until 2007, they didn't have standing to maintain. And the news, of course, the Wampanoags were one who fed the colonizers coming in. That was given the day before Thanksgiving. So it continues.
This is hard.
Yep.
I'm going to be the first to acknowledge, to do this conversation in 30 minutes is impossible. And so I almost feel with a lot of great sadness that we're not having an hour-long program, and we shall have you both back in to continue the conversation. And I want to save time for the audience to ask questions. You're here to be engaged in this conversation. So I've got about a couple more questions before we hand it out to the audience. So let's dive right into, the ending of the film in giving us some kind of hope, and it lie, with healing. Mm-hmm. The film mentions the perpetrator and the government having a system, many systems in place in which poverty is a crime in a lot of ways. They go through the child welfare system, or, in ways in which we're vulnerable as marginalized community and how they can attack. And so I'm going to ask this question about, yes, truth, reconciliation, and healing is part of the process. But in order to dismantle these systems that continuously, and we're up here, obviously speaking truth to the fact that it's been hundreds of years in the making, how do we finally get to the place of dismantling these systems of injustice and get to a place where we have real solutions? And I think many of us who are coming here tonight, we want to know that, regardless of our own experiences, of our class. We understand what the truth is. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think that our memories are long, and it takes a lot to unravel. And I think rushing something through is a very dominant way of looking at solutions. Well, we have this, and this is where I want to be. So I want to travel this path as fast as I can. It doesn't work that way in Native communities. We're still mourning the 500 years when Columbus lost his way. So we're still dealing with a lot of that historical trauma. And it was a telling point when they said they wanted the executive director to be Native. That doesn't automatically mean that everything's going to be solved that way, but it recognizes that you give priority to somebody who can come from within that community and offer that. I mean, my grandmother was sent to boarding school, my aunts and uncles, but they ran away. They put them too close so they could run away. So it's in our families, and I don't think that we've really healed from those experiences. So my grandmother wouldn't talk about it at all. She only mentioned one thing, and the one thing was they tried to change her name from Miko, which they thought sounded, okay, that's a leader, so we'll call you King. And she refused to answer the name. And she just, no, I'm not going to do that. So her resistance was small but meaningful. So I think what we need to do is to leave your ideas behind and come with an open heart. And the healing it's going to take a long time because there's still so much healing. But we also need to know from the people who are involved in the system, and a good friend of mine was in the administrative system in San Francisco and had to go and do all kinds of seminars on ICWA. I should point out, too, ICWA is being gutted again. They've already passed, Texas already passed the federal court saying ICWA is discriminatory for not allowing non-Native people to have it. There are also Ohio, Indiana, Illinois are pushing to demolish ICWA. And it's being funded by the Goldwater Institute, who is a major supporter of the current president, and the Mercer family are major donors to the Goldwater Institute. So it's still going on. So they're looking to overturn ICWA in many, many ways. So we have to be stronger in that commitment to say, no, you're not. We're going to organize, we're going to rally, we're going to do the things that we need to do, but it's going to come from within the community. It's not coming from outside.
Mm-hmm. Marty?
Well, I think, the question you're posing is for someone who's coming as a settler, and I think I just could piggyback on what the amazing Professor Nico. This is my professor, y'all. It's kind of intimidating. I just want to say, I got it.
Got it. See, there was a reason
I think mine's coming off. See?
Okay,
they're all coming off. Okay.
But we're still on, so,
right.
okay.
So I just want to say, to add to that, I would think, also if you're one of the people who want to be part of the healing, right? And really thinking about this work, truth and reconciliation, right? So what does that mean when folks ask you to step back? Because that's actually where I've seen people push back. Like, I want to be an ally. And then when folks are like, okay, so you need to step back. Can you go downstairs? Can you leave the room? For example, I just saw like on the other day on Facebook, there's going to be a women's march, right, in January. And so the women's march has asked a group of Indigenous women to be like the front or do something. I forgot. And so then in the Facebook invite, they were like, this is only for Indigenous women. Like literally wrote that. And then there was like someone who's definitely not Indigenous was like, but I still want to stand on stage and like support you all. But how is that support when already people have said, this is not for, we don't want you to be there? So, and then what does it mean to be support? They were saying support for them was to stand on stage, like maybe behind or whatever. But that's not support if people already called that out. So what does that mean if you are a settler living on occupied land? And I love that quote, or that, I forgot who said it in the film, but they said, moving from an occupier to a neighbor.
Oh, the Mashpee guy.
Yes, it was him. He's fierce. What'd you say?
No. I just said it's the Mashpee guy.
Yes. And so I think that's what I would say in addition to really know when to step back. And not only step back, like also some of you might have dollars, and to really think about, so if you're making profit off of stolen land, right, and we're talking about truth and reconciliation, so how can you repatriate some of that money to go back to Native organizations, to go back to the tribe of those people, to go back, right? So if you're making profit off of occupied land, right, and you pay taxes to the U.S. government, maybe you create your own little tax and you give that to Native nonprofits in your neighborhood or a national one, or, the tribe that's there. So that I would say that. And then I would also say the third thing I've been really trying to push with folks, even governments, lots of different governments all over the world. Some do, some don't, but do land acknowledgement. And so like whenever you start, maybe you work at like, I don't know, Salesforce. And maybe you're like, hey, just the beginning, after I say my name and my pronouns or whatever you do, but I just like to recognize we're on stolen or lonely land, right? Because some people might not even know that the land that they're on. So land acknowledgement is huge. And I was just at the school board meeting the other day, and I was urging the whole school board in San Francisco, like, hey, let's acknowledge the land that we're on. Let's recognize. And I think I just saw it like a few months ago. They just came out with a big map that you could go to exactly where you live in the world. It's called I think it's nativeland.ca or something like that. But you could go exactly to wherever you're at, and bam, it will tell you the name of the land, the tribe, everything. This is a Google map kind of function, but it's not done by Google. It's done by Native Land. And so we could figure out how to maybe get those resources to you, or maybe I could write it on the Facebook page, the link. But anywhere you're at, so whenever you're traveling, you go to travel to Chicago. Whose land is Chicago? Right? Just asking yourself those questions, I think, would be in addition to the other two. Stepping back, putting your money where your mouth is, and then, the third is, land acknowledgement. And I actually recently just did that with, there's a kids hip-hop group. They're called Alphabet Rockers. They just are Grammy nominated. They hit me up. They were like, Madi, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to do a certain percentage of all our profits we made off our CD and our stuff this year. Tell us who we should donate to. Like, can we? And they donated some money to Bates, Bay Area Native American Two-Spirit Society, because they're working on an album about gender creativity. So they want to highlight those voices. So, you could do that with anything, with your business, with your personal stuff, with your Christmas money, whatever.
Yes, that holiday is coming up very soon. My last question. My last question before we open it up to the audience. Again, John has a handheld mic, and he'll roam around and just raise your hand if you have a question and speak into the mic as we're taping the program. But my last question is around, dovetailing from that last question of electing leaders and bring real or authentic, genuine voices of the Native and Indigenous community to the table. This last election, we have elected Deb Haaland, Cherise Davis, members of the Indigenous Native community to Congress or to, positions of power, if you will. And I'd love to know kind of how you both feel about this being a moment in 2018 and going through so much trauma throughout all those years, that this is a step in the right direction, or is it not? What your thoughts are?
Well, it has to be. I mean, we can't be idle no more. We can't, that wasn't a plug directly, but it's true. I mean, we can't sit and be complacent anymore. We actually have to stand up for the environment. We have to stand up for religious freedom. We have to stand up for the removal of children, any children, being removed from homes and being incarcerated, because that's what was happening in boarding schools. They were incarcerated. They were abused. They were sexually abused. They were physically abused. And this government, Obama signed sort of an apology in private, no media, in 2009. No idea of reparations. You saw Justin Trudeau. The Anglican Church apologized and opened up a case for money, which in some ways was beneficial to the people, although it doesn't even cover what they went through. But because of those revelations, and I worry about that too if you're an outsider to the process, when they did, 22 men committed suicide as soon as they were able to tell their story of abuse. So it's a very tricky situation, but right now I think we have to move, and we have to take whatever forward momentum that we have, particularly with these new laws that are coming in that are going to gut ICWA. We really need to stand up, and we have to say, no, you're not going to do that. We're not going to allow you to do that. And the Women's March was evidence of that. And the one you're talking about too, Mari, is when, we've been asked to be at the front of the line for missing and murdered Indigenous women. To recognize that too. So we can't. I mean, I'm retired now, and I'm a grandmother and all of that, but it's still, I'll put my feet on the ground to do that, as our other members have done too as grandmothers. It's our obligation to do that.
So the beginning of this year, I told one of my friends, Amy, her name's Amy Anderson, and I told them, I said, you know what? Time's up. Not just for like sexual harassment, but for all this crap. I was like, I'm born and raised in San Francisco, and I'm tired of us being an invisible minority, like in San Francisco. It's like basically there's a report written called Discrimination by Omission, and that like Native people are constantly being omitted out of almost every conversation and statistics in San Francisco and in the Bay Area. So I was like, you know what? I'm tired of this. I was like, we're gonna do stuff, we're gonna win, and it's gonna all come down to 2018. So this is the first year I'd like to, just in terms of local wins, we don't have Columbus Day anymore. It's Indigenous Peoples Day. I was one of the co-writers of that legislation, along with Denny Leonard and Tony Ortiz, and that was huge. It was kind of sad, though, because on the repercussions is that the Italian-American community in North Beach took it as an attack on, I guess, their Italianness or whatever, and then they came back at us. And they actually found someone who was like a fake Ohlone person, saying that the Lohnes were never contacted, which is not true, because the Ohlone tribe was like, when we walked into the Ohlone tribe was like, no, actually, we support this. But yeah, so then now it is technically both days. And so that would have been a great time, because we kept saying like, no, we don't want to share the day. Like the Italian American, heritage community in North Beach has never used the second Monday for anything. They actually have their parade on the second Sunday, and they don't even call it Columbus Day Parade anymore. They call it Dawnland Heritage. But they were insistent, and they had white privilege, and there was 20 of them. And so they got what they wanted. We got to, now we share the day. So that's really sad. I would have loved to see more settler allies step up in that. I didn't see any. And then the second thing is, but it's still a win because it's not Columbus Day. And the second thing is that the Pioneer statue, that took decades of organizing for folks. And then definitely there were times, I think, when we talk about organizing, it's like this, right? It's like a roller coaster. You're doing, and then people get tired. So then people got to take a break. And sometimes that break is like 10 years. And sometimes it's true, right? And sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 30. And so, when those statues in the South were coming down, I think it ignited a lot of stuff and everything. Definitely ignited in me, and I started having dreams of like this Pioneer statue coming down. I was like, oh crap, we got to get started again. So, now we got social media. They didn't have social media in the 90s. And so it got taken down. I was one of the organizers of that, along with lots of other people, and on the foundation of folks in the 90s who worked on that. Probably Melinda Miko worked on that in the 90s and everything. And now next we're going to take down the racist Life of Washington murals in San Francisco. We just, we didn't start. We've been telling the school board in San Francisco for a while. We've been wanting them down. And before the Native American parents and Native American students in the school district said it, in the 70s, Black parents were saying to take it down because actually it depicts African Americans enslaved and also Native Americans enslaved, and also shows dead Indian bodies on the Life of Washington murals inside Washington High School. So the school district has formed now called it's a Reflection and Action Committee. We just had our first meeting. And so we have 3 more meetings, and out of that, we're supposed to have a process of how those murals are going to come down. I just want to say, when we think about all these things, there's really racist things. If you go to Mission High School, there's a huge mural of a naked Native child. There's child who's naked and they're Native. So that means it's child pornography inside high school that minors go to. And that's in the Mission District of San Francisco. And so I think there's so many things that we can get involved with here locally in terms of supporting stuff. I know the Maliseet still keeps asking for Presidio back. They keep saying they want it back. That's a campaign you can get on. So I also really followed Cherise Davis and Deb's campaign, especially Cherise will be the very first Two-Spirit person ever elected to Congress. A lot of people say Native American woman, but she is very here, and I'm queer. She's been super out, very open. So I think that's very huge too, and I want to give space to that too, because I think a lot of times people don't talk about Two-Spirit folks or Native Americans who are queer too. And so I think that's really huge. And I think there's been a lot of little things like that. I know San Jose, they got rid of their Columbus statue. They're all over. There's, the Native communities all over, whether they're urban or they're rural or they're reservation or reserve or rancherias. Folks have been doing stuff and making steps more forward. And I think in some way, when Trump got elected, so a lot of people had to decide, I got to really pick a team here. I can't just be oh, we have a Black president. Oh, so life is so good. Post-racial. Nobody says post-racial now. You notice that? No one says that. But people were saying it when it was Obama. So I think that's something that, as we look at the current state, there's so many ways to support local Native American communities, like I said, again, whether they're urban or they're rural, and really, really looking at, I feel like Natives, especially in this contemporary sense, we've came to the point where we're not going to shut up. We're demanding to be heard, and we're going to make you hear it. And I saw that at Standing Rock, right? And I've gone to a lot of Red Power stuff. I went to, Oak Flat with the Apaches there. And when I went to Standing Rock, I was like, damn, this is a whole nother level. Like I met this like lady, she was from Germany. She's like, I had a dream that I was supposed to come here and I do environmental like activist work all around the world and blah, blah. And I came here and she was just talking to me about all this stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And so really looking at like Indigenous peoples really standing up. We've been doing this work for a long time, but I think it's gotten to the point where we're so pushed, we're like, okay, so in terms of folks who are allies, what side are you on? And I think that's where the missing pieces is that we need to see those settler allies come into fruition. Because when I notice when folks step up along with us and stand in solidarity with us, or maybe stand behind us, or stand in the back or downstairs or whatever, or maybe no one sees you at all, people listen more. Because you all have access to certain things that I don't get to have access to, whether that's money, whether that's your social network of people who have money. Maybe that's your social network of people, maybe you know like 5 journalists, and I wouldn't know those people, things like that. So I think those are the things that I want to add, is that there's this consciousness that coming more and more, especially with that pioneer statue. When it came down, it just felt like the whole city was like, we are so ready to have this come down, right? Like 3 different mayors, and everybody was ready except one racist white guy from Petaluma was the only one who was like, no, keep it, right? Who's still actually planning on suing the city for taking it down. But I think that's huge, because if it was only still the Native community like it was in the 90s, right, with a few allies, it might have not came down. But the other folks were like, no, we stand along with the Native folks. Like, we think that's wrong too. That's the difference. And I think the difference is also educating our future kids, right? Let's get rid of these racist textbooks in our schools, right? Let's stop teaching the myth of Pocahontas, right? All this made up stuff. I remember actually Melinda Miko made us watch Disney Pocahontas in our class one time. It's like, damn, do we really have to watch this? It's so racist.
It was my first time watching it, as you remember.
I know. But it shows you, like, this is what our kids are really learning. And that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And the only reason why it will always keep continuing is we keep feeding it to them.
Yeah.
So let's stop those myths, stop those lies.
So much to unpack and to do. Let's open it up for questions from our audience. And because we're limited in time, please direct your question to one of our speakers. And we'll try to move through the next 10 minutes or so.
Hi, my name is Dr. Melody Hayes. I'm one of the few Black people who's not trying to claim to be part Native American, but I am an ally.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that sentiment you just said.
But what I wanted to talk about was, I just was looking at some statistics on just the suicide rate in the Native American community that continues to be high. And you saw the amazing documentary about this is historic, and it continues, where people of color are alienated from our pride, from our culture, from our family. And I'm working in an area of transformational medicine with psychedelic medicine to help people recover from trauma. But I wanted to talk about ask a question about one of the things that was addressed in the documentary is culturally appropriate ways of recovering from trauma.
Okay. I'll address that because we have a handout here. Dr. Maria Yellow Brave Horse, if I got her name right, talks very specifically, one, about how you identify the trauma, and then as a community, how you work through that trauma. It's very, very specific, and it's targeted to the Native community. So I did a documentary on sterilization of Native women, and we didn't interview anybody who had been sterilized because at the time we didn't have healing circles set up. And we felt it was unethical for us to make them share their trauma and then say, well, thank you. That was really nice. So I think unless you have that framework that comes from within the Native community, it's going to fall apart because it's so deeply entrenched in that. Remember the woman said it's been 55 years and it's still fresh in her mind. So, and we're asking them to re-traumatize. We're asking them to tell their story again, but again, if you, as Reach says, if you don't get the story out, you'll never get the healing. So it's like pulling that Band-Aid off. It's really going to hurt for a while, but there just has to be so much healing, and we have to hold people in that process of healing. We also have to mentor. I mean, we do that in our grandmother's group in Idle No More. We have to mentor the young people to tell them how to go through that process. And whatever, we're not magic, we don't have all the answers, but if we stick to a protocol that honors a Native way of doing it, then we probably have a much better chance of success. Okay, all right.
Hi, I'm Christian Dejnik. I was a Potawatomi Endow. I'm a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and this film hit home because both my father and my grandmother were sent to boarding schools. We've talked a lot about the Women's March, but is there any plans for a local Indigenous Peoples March, which happens the day after the Women's March in Washington?
Well, we're doing a women's march and we're going to be at the front of that. So to represent MMIW, Missing Murdered Indigenous Women. And I know that's happening in January. We've already been asked to be at the front of that. So what we're trying to do too is numbers. We had the climate march, and 30,000 people came to the climate march. When we had the summit, the global summit that was here, we wanted to offer the alternative to the global summit. So we as you saw, we closed down the street. We grandmothers closed the street, and we held the line, even against the police, which was you just smile and say, no, you're not coming through.
I tried that once before.
I don't think they want to hit anybody with gray hair. It's like it's such a bad media shot, to hit a grandmother with gray hair. But because we painted 55 murals about the climate, because we don't have time. We have 12 years to get this on track. So what we need to do is push the women. And, thankfully the Native men in our groups are saying, it's time for you women. What they don't know, it's always been our time. But anyway, we appreciate that they put us in the front, and they're behind us. AIM's behind us. When we're in the marches, we singing up front, and we have AIM behind us. And that's a bit of a switch. And certainly from the American Indian movement at Wounded Knee, it's a little bit of a switch. So yes, we're doing that in collaboration, like Madi was saying, in collaboration with our allies, because there's strength in numbers. And it's pretty scary when you watch that whole march that occurred that day in 2017, and you saw the bodies and all the hats. I made several for my granddaughter, my daughter, and I guess my son-in-law won't wear one. But anyway, I made them. So that strength in number shows that you're not going to ignore us anymore. We're here, and we're going to be vocal.
Sure, yeah, one more question, please.
The movie spoke about the Truth and Reconciliation Committee in Maine. How widespread is that throughout the other states and Canada, elsewhere?
It's not. There was a Truth and Reconciliation in Canada, but Canada was much more open. I'm not saying Canada is magic, it's not. But there was certainly the Anglican Church felt responsibility and actually opened it up enough to have reparations. But I think this was a moment in time where the Micmac and the Wabanaki were able to come together and really force that TRC. But I'm not seeing waves of that around. And unless we get an administration that says a real apology that comes with meaning, we're never going to have another Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It's not going to happen because you have to have somebody higher up saying that, even though Justin Trudeau, and there were cases brought forth and they were dismissed. Cases of abuse that people were bringing up from the boarding schools, but there was nothing done about it. So if you don't give reparation or you don't acknowledge it, it's like, well, did it really happen? Didn't happen to us. Is this really truthful? What happened? And we bear the scars of that truth, and we know it happened. We have that testimony, and it may not reach. Even the women who talked to me after I showed them my film and tell me about their stories or what happened, or people being asked to sign adoption papers while they were still pregnant and things like that, but they're not going to share them. That's going to stay in the community because they don't feel safe to share them at this point. So I would like to be more hopeful about that. We just have to keep pushing. I believe in pushing. Is that last
That-
That was the
Question.
first and only two in the U.S. The
Yeah.
truth and really,
First and two.
the first and only in the U.S.
in the U.S.?
not in the world.
No. Well, obviously, South Africa, which was
Yeah.
the model, which was a wonderful model for that, but still had fits and starts to it. But as long as we have a model, we can at least go forward from that. But as things keep getting targeted, like the Mashpee losing their trust status and the states pushing to overturn ICWA, we have a battle on our hands. But hey, we've done it before.
Battle in our hands. We've done it before, and there's more work to do. And organizing in this way, bringing communities together for truth and acknowledging it, and then getting a little bit of homework, especially when it's listed by Madi. Here, there are things that we can do. So I want to thank you all for being here today. You're a part of the change. Let's thank our panelists, Madi Villaluna and
Thank
Dr.
you.
Melinda Miko.
Thanks, Mari.
Of course, thank you, President. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. Thank you to the producers and the director of Dawnland, and thank you to Lori Bilella and Sophia and all the great, amazing leaders at Women's March for making this happen. Let's go out there and let's make some change, and let's protect our Indigenous, Native folks and be a part of the fight to tell the truth and make it so that this stops.
Yes.
We can be better. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.